Oh, you smoke cigarettes? You're going to hell. Oh, you're a Democrat? You're going to hell. How can you be a Democrat? You're going to hell. Oh, you go to a party on the weekends and drink beer? You're going to hell. Nobody ever told me, hey, can I help you with this? Nobody ever came up to me, can I help you with this? Can I help you better yourself? Do you need somebody to talk to about this? It was all judgmental, judgmental, judgmental. And that was something I didn't want to be a part of. That was something I told myself in my head, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want people to look at me like this because I'm not like this. If this is really what most of this faith is about, then I don't want anything to do with this.
I mean, I met a lot of people that bucked a lot of the things that I was taught. Had a lot of gay friends, and I started to kind of see the world a lot differently. It really bothered me that I had met so many great friends and people, and that it was something that was wrong, viewed as wrong, and I think that that affected me, and I would say it's still something that I would say is maybe my number one complaint.
As of right now, I am an atheist. I don't believe there is a God.
No matter how close of a relationship you have with your students, no matter how involved they are inside your ministry, no matter how strong of a youth ministry you lead, it is still humbling as a leader to hear of a former student completely walking away from their faith. Today, we speak with two former students about their journey from student leadership to atheism.
The Thought Factory podcast is brought to you by Never the Same, cultivating students through biblical discipleship and spiritual disciplines using theology, community, and technology. Learn more at neverthesame.org.
We are glad you're with us here for this episode. We are going to jump right in and be talking about some pretty heavy stuff today. But let's remind you, if you're listening to this and you didn't listen to our last episode, it was a good one.
The last episode that we had on the Thought Factory was with Matthew DePrez. He is with Fuller Youth Institute. He discussed students walking away from their faith and the research behind that, and gave a lot of his thoughts and expertise.
In our next episode, we're going to be interviewing a person. I cannot wait for you to hear this one. It's with a guy named J. Warner Wallace. Amazing, amazing person, an expert when it comes to apologetics in Christianity, and wrote a book called Cold Case Christianity, which I just want to encourage you, if you're working with students, you should have your hands on this book. It's a great book where he talks about evidences of faith and how important that is for students today. So that's in our next episode. Join us for that as well.
He is a cold case homicide detective that has been featured on Dateline more times than any other detective. And so he knows evidence, he knows just how to approach something with such facts and reason. And he has done the same thing with Christianity and has gone from being an atheist to a full believer in Christ. And so it is an episode that you do not want to miss.
Now, if you want your hands on the information where we get a lot of the content for this podcast, I want to tell you right now where you can get that. neverthesame.org/podcast. If you go to that website, neverthesame.org/podcast. Never the Same is the name of the organization that we're a part of. If you go there, and you'll be able to get your hands on this beautiful 20-page report called the Adolescence in the Church Trend Report 2018. And it has brand new, fresh research that we've done with thousands of students across the country about their beliefs and behaviors. So check that out.
For today, we have an episode that's more personal to Jeff and I. We have interviewed former students of ours. We have discussed with them the reasons why they walked away from their faith. They are former students. For me, it was someone that was a student leader. He was super involved from middle school through high school, graduated, went off to a Christian college, and we just discussed the fact that he has walked away completely from faith. Same with you, Jeff, a former student. We just thought it would be interesting to just hear from them why and where they're at, and what we could have done even as youth pastors, as their youth leaders, when they're in high school, to almost avoid this situation of them walking away from their faith.
We've approached this episode a little bit differently than we have others, and Jayson and I have talked a lot about this just as friends and off the air here about relationships that we have with former students like these. This is a bittersweet interview for me because we poured our lives into these guys, and yet we've kept the relationships intact.
Yeah.
Jayson, you have, and I have. with Corey. And so that's a good thing. And I'm one for the long haul. You know, that relationship means a lot to me. I know it does to you. And as we talked today, we thought that it would be good to hear from their perspective. And we have looked internally, personally, you and I, Jayson, about this. And we've looked to our ministries with these students and said, what could we have done differently to avoid this conversation that we're having today with them?
It's a humbling interview. It is one of those that like you said, we kind of shine the spotlight onto our leadership as when we were youth pastors and going through what we thought was the best for these students. And then when you have a discussion with former students that have walked away, they love you, they still are in relationship with you, but they have denied what you are passionate about and what you have taught them and what you have tried to steer them towards a relationship with God, a relationship with Jesus Christ, and to allow that to transform their decisions and behaviors and lifestyle and all of these things that you go, a life lived for Jesus is so worth it. And they go, no, I don't want that anymore. And so, yeah, you look back and the conversation is just, it's eye-opening.
I think we've talked openly and honestly with each other about our level of responsibility and culpability in these relationships and these situations with students. And as you're listening to this, if you've worked with students over an amount of time and you've had different students cycle through ministry in your life and in their life as they've gone through middle school and high school, you can look back and you can have conversations like this. And generally, they may even be able to look in the eye and say, I really appreciate and admire what you did in my life. And that's always been the case with students like this for me. They would never say, and they maybe never would even think this, but I would think it is like, if I'd have done something differently, if I would have had maybe that other conversation or taught some different content or whatever, would it have made a difference in where they were in the future and where they are now? And that's what I think about with interviews like this.
Well, for today, I really appreciate you just joining us and agreeing to come and have a conversation like I mentioned on the phone yesterday. We just wanted to get your take on where you're at and the fact that you were super involved in my youth ministry, in the youth group. You were a student leader. You were at camp for 7 years straight, all the way up through your senior year of high school, and really just have a conversation from your involvement with the Christian faith and then how you approach life now as an atheist. I mentioned just kind of, this isn't, we're not sitting here ready to have this gotcha moment where it's going to be, we're trying to corner you into some sort of debate or make you look silly. We are coming from an angle of humility in a sense. As youth pastors, we are both former youth pastors and still have relationships with students that have graduated and have decided to walk away from the faith that we were trying to instill in them as spiritual leaders. And so you came to mind. We're on the phone with Aiman, Jarrar, and we are just discussing that, hearing your story, hearing about how that decision played out to walk away from not only just your faith, but like a lifestyle of going to church and believing what you were, the number of years that you've believed, into how it plays out into your life and the decisions that you make now, believing that there is no God. And we both respect each other. I know that. And I respect where you're coming from. And we're discussing spiritual growth in students' lives and this topic of students walking away from their faith when they graduate high school. And you are someone that I respect and I love and want to just hear from you that process.
So, Aiman, why don't you start by going back a few years and talk about your experience with faith and Christianity and God early on in your journey of growing, whenever that might be, middle school, high school. Talk to us about that stage of your life and your faith.
Well, the funny thing is my grandfather is actually a pastor, which I think both of you know. And so at a very young age, I was exposed to Christianity, going to church with my grandfather, dressing up in my little suits, singing I Saw the Light and whatnot at his church, and grew from that. to a point of where I was exposed to daybreak in a completely different side of Christianity, a side that I liked more, where it was more free, it was more involved, it was more not just here's the Bible, here's what you need to know, here's how to live your life. It was more of an involvement and more of a this is fun. Christianity can be fun, faith can be fun. Whether it was going to camp, whether it was hanging out with my small group leader on the weekdays, watching basketball, doing other things as a group that didn't involve church. So that was what really drew me in. And you guys did a great job, and I'm sure you still do with camp, of doing that, of drawing people in and then exposing them in a right way to Christianity so they can see a different side of it that they're not used to, because that's what drew me in, a side that I wasn't used to of faith. And that's what drew me in. So going from there, when I got into middle school, high school, started to go to daybreak every week, starting to go to youth group every week, I became very involved. I loved it. I loved God. I was in a great relationship with God. I was in a great place. Yes, I still sinned. Yes, I was still drinking on the weekends sometimes. I wasn't perfect. Nobody is. But I was trying to better myself. You know, I was smoking cigarettes at 17 years old, right before I walked in the door at Flood. And it was something that I know Jayson talked to me about multiple times. It was something that I tried to work on. But that was something that I didn't see as that big of a deal. I didn't see it as a huge sin. I'm not going out and having sex with multiple women all the time. I'm not, doing this. I'm not doing that. It's just one little thing I have. Sure, I drink a beer every now and then. Sure, I smoke cigarettes. Is it really that big of a deal? And that was something I never really took seriously. But I had such a great relationship with God beyond that I felt that it was okay to have those two little vices in my life. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, yeah. Then let's keep going. So, faith is an active part of your life. You're very engaged with Jayson. And then talk to us about kind of that next phase, post high school, what your experience was there. And as I understand your story, that's where things with faith and your beliefs began to really change.
Yeah, so I got a full ride to Cornerstone, which is a private Christian university. Was very, very excited to go there. I was actually, the second semester of my last year of high school, I was actually taking two classes there. What really made me walk away from my faith was the judgmental aspect of Christianity that I ran into at Cornerstone. Oh, you smoke cigarettes? You're going to hell. Oh, you're a Democrat? You're going to hell. How can you be a Democrat? You're going to hell. Oh, you go to a party on the weekends and drink beer? You're going to hell. Nobody ever told me, hey, can I help you with this? Nobody ever came up to me, can I help you with this? Can I help you better yourself? Do you need somebody to talk to about this? It was all judgmental. And that was something I didn't want to be a part of. That was something I told myself in my head, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want people to look at me like this because I'm not like this. If this is really what most of this faith is about, then I don't want anything to do with this, because the Bible states not to judge unto others. That's only the job for God. Only God can judge. Yet we see so many people, and it's not just at Cornerstone, we see so many people judging others for their sins and telling people, oh, you can't be doing this or you're going to burn. Look at the crazy sides of Christianity, like the Westboro Baptist Church, and every religion has their crazy side, don't get me wrong. The Westboro Baptist Church and people like that. And I understand that not everybody's like that, but from my experience in faith in Christianity, you get people judging you for your sins 99% of the time, and not in a crazy way, not in this, not in that, but it's only that 1% that comes up to you, like you, Jayson. You're in that 1% that comes up to you, hey, do you need help with this? Hey, do you need to talk about this? And that's something I just didn't want to be a part of. There were other aspects to it in my life, relationship issues, health issues with my family, that just made me think, if there really really is a God, why am I going through this? If there really is a God, why are so many people in the world struggling? Why are so many people in the world starving to death? You know, things that I'm sure you guys have thought about in your struggles, because even though you guys are strong in your faith, we all have those aspects. And I even did it when I was very strong and I had a great relationship with God. I struggled with those questions as well.
You
Does that
mentioned,
make sense?
yeah, absolutely. You mentioned of struggling with those kind of thoughts in high school, and just wondering, in your time of high school, you were super engaged. I remember you being incredibly excited about the musical worship of any event, a camp, or in the youth ministry, the youth group. You'd be the first one to the front of the stage. There was this sense of excitement about it. And then talk to us about, was there the doubt that you had, you kind of mentioned about God's character, God's approach to humanity. Talk about those doubts in high school.
Those doubts in high school definitely came, especially when my first true love broke up with me. Those doubts came for sure, but they weren't really there because I was so engaged and so focused and had a great network around me, a great network of people who were also strong in their faith, a great network of people who were there to help me. People like you, people like Justin Jewell, people like my small group who I had around me to help me with those things. So while those doubts came and went, they weren't persistently there.
And then, Aiman, would you say now that you've kind of gone through this journey, would you say now that those questions still pose a barrier for your faith? I mean, talk about where you are in your faith right now.
As of right now, I am an atheist. I don't believe there is a God. At times, I do have thoughts in my head. Maybe there is a God, stuff like that. I'm not necessarily convinced that there is. And I guess the barriers in my head for me going back to faith is everything that I've been through, all the aspects that I've talked to you guys about, etc. and so forth. I don't know. It's not something that I really think about, Jeff. It's not something that I think about. I never think about returning to faith. I never think about really going back to reading the Bible, going back to trying to rebuild a relationship with God. It's not really something that I think about because I'm happy about where I am in my life right now. I think things are going well for me for the most part. There are some aspects that I need to work on as a person, but it's not something that really has me thinking, man, I really need help. I need to run back to God for help. I have a great network of friends around me who help me. I have a great family who helps me when I'm down. So it's not something that necessarily, I guess those would be considered barriers. I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but it's not something that goes through my head, man, I need God in my life, because I don't feel it that way.
I mean, when we met for dinner a while ago.
Yeah, with my ex.
Yeah, one of your ex-girlfriends. There was a sense of grief for me to kind of hear that how Christians cause you to walk away from Christianity. Not me, myself, but to hear that you went off to a Christian school, and because of the ridicule and the judgment that you received from those who claim faith in Jesus Christ, those conversations cause you to walk away from the faith, that the same faith that I have. And there was a sense of grief for you, for the years of leadership that I have had the privilege of in your life. All that to say, looking back, how would you encourage somebody in my position, leading someone like you who may not have been as confident or as prepared or equipped to defend against the ridicule and the judgment, and have a solid faith in Christ to deflect those comments and still be able to walk with strength in the Christian walk?
Well, Jayson, the first thing I'm going to say to you is it's not your fault. And I don't want you feeling bad because I did walk away. And I'm sure you're going to, and I understand that completely. But it's not your fault. You are not the reason that I walked away from faith. Nothing, you were always good to me. But going back to the question is, yeah, I wasn't equipped for that because I never experienced it. I never experienced that. Other Christians would come up to me and tell me that I'm a sinner, I'm going to hell. You know, like I said earlier, if they would have come up to me and said, hey, how can I help you with this? Then it would have been a completely different aspect, and I still might be a Jesus follower today. But I guess my advice for somebody would be not to take it to heart. Don't take it personally. Make sure you have a great network of people around you to help you when you get attacked like that. And don't take it to heart. Run to those who you have close, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Is that really the question, Jayson?
Sort of, but I also was on the perspective of the youth leader who is leading students to follow Jesus Christ. And ultimately, there's stats of the number of students that they graduate high school and they walk away. And as a youth leader, are we preparing students to defend their faith post-graduation? Are we doing what we need to be doing, or are we focused on the wrong thing, almost anticipating an assumption when that assumption is never going to be reality, because students are walking away and we think they're going to be okay when in reality they're not, and we haven't prepared them adequately. And so I guess from your perspective of post-graduation, post-faith, how can you speak into a youth leader who is investing their time and energy and efforts to lead students to have a faith in Jesus Christ?
Well, that's a tough question, because so many students, they either go far away for college, they don't stay in touch, they weren't as involved as I was. And, you know, Jayson, you and I stayed in touch, which is awesome. It's great to have you as a friend. But the advice I would give to you and Jeff would be, make sure your students know the battles they are going to face once they leave for college. Make sure they're prepared for the attacks they're going to receive. Make sure they are prepared for the temptations they're going to receive. And that's something that I think every youth leader needs to work on more so, because I was not ready. I was not prepared for all the temptations. I was not prepared for, and I didn't go far away. I was at a Christian school, and those temptations were still there. Those attacks still happened. That's one of the reasons I went to a Christian school, is because I knew I wasn't prepared for those. I knew I was not prepared, and they still occurred. So that would be my advice to you and Jeff. Would make sure your students are ready, are prepared for those. Stay in touch as much as you can, and be there to help them even after they graduate. Send them a text. Hey, do you need help with anything? How are you doing? Shoot them a phone call. Hey, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. And I know that's a lot of students for you guys to manage, but just once a month, once every 2 months, it's something just so they know you're still thinking about them and you haven't completely stopped thinking about them because they're not in your youth ministry anymore. That's something that would definitely help.
That's good. Thank you, Aiman, for your thoughts and just even agreeing to join us to have this conversation, to be open, to be respectful to what we believe and to what we're trying to do as well. I love you like a brother.
I love you too, man. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Aiman. I'm so glad you're able to join us, man. Well, you spoke some truth and wisdom, man. We really appreciate it.
Yep, it was good. It's great to connect.
You know, you guys are two of my favorite people. So I love you guys to death, and I'm glad everything's going well with camp and whatnot, and I hope you guys are out there changing lives.
After we return from the break, we will hear from a former student of Jeff's, so stay tuned.
So my name is Kyle Ray. I serve as the lead pastor at Kentwood Community Church. So I started coming to NTS camp during the summer, really because I needed to see it for myself. I didn't grow up in a camp experience, so I grew up in church, but we didn't have a summer camp experience. So when I would hear people talk about all of the benefits of summer camp, they made a pretty strong case for it, and it required a lot of time and energy to get students there. And so as a lead pastor, I just needed to see for myself that it was all that it was cracked up to be. And once I came the first time, I could see how much of an encouragement it was to the students. It was one of those settings where they would start to look around and say, we don't see other senior pastors here. And so I didn't get prideful about that. I just realized that it meant a lot to them. In fact, the first year I came, students ran from their activity, hoisted me on their shoulders, and were celebrating the fact that I was there. And so you get something like that done for you, you can't help but go back year after year.
Sitting here with Corey, one of my former students. Corey,
Hello.
what should I even call you now?
Dude, you can call me whatever you want.
What
I
am
go
I
by
gonna say
Bordo
after?
now.
Okay, that's what I
that's formal, but I don't worry about it. You know,
You changed your name.
I did.
How
yeah.
old were you when you changed your name?
I was 18.
You're 18 when you changed. That sounds about right.
Yeah, I would say it's about right. Yeah, if I look back now, I'm like, I didn't need to take it that far.
Wait, is Bordo your official name?
It is.
It went from Corey Aiman to Corey Bordo.
Yeah. I think it was an
Okay.
identity crisis in full extent, you know, but I could have done other more damaging
On full
things.
display for the world, yeah. Well, at least you don't have some big gaudy tattoo, hopefully, right?
No,
on
I
your
don't.
chest or
no,
something
I got
like-
a key lime pie on my ankle.
Okay, oh, that's good.
Yeah. No,
You like
that's
key
good.
lime pie.
I do, just not in people's ankles.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite dessert, dude.
So I was Corey's youth pastor. We've known each other since you were
7th grade, I think that's when you
came to
came
the church.
into the scene. Yeah.
Yeah. So real tight friends with your family, and yeah, it was. Those are some good memories, good days.
Good days.
Saw you come through middle school, and then I was your official pastor in high school, although
Right.
I knew you in middle school. And we traveled. I used to lead worship in those days. We traveled around the country a little bit, did
Mhm.
that.
We had fun playing, man.
We did. And I wish I had half your musical talent, but here we are. So it's so good to have you with us, Corey, to
Thank
share
you.
a little bit. And
Good to be here.
we've been on a long road together in many, many ways. So thanks for being here. And let's just go back to middle school, high school,
Sure.
and your faith. I mean, you were a student leader with us.
Sure.
You're in the student leader role. You're a worship leader. You're on stage. You went on trips. You did about everything that a student could do. Let's talk about where your faith was back in those days.
Yeah. Well, I love music. You know, I think that was a huge draw to the church. You know, that was one of the first times I kind of had that self-awareness about acceptance and people being like, "Oh, wow, you're good at this," you know, and that was a good feeling. As far as the faith, you know, it's hard to even call it that as I look back, because I'm kind of weary of having such strong feelings about something at such a young age. You know, you're really undeveloped. Even though I think I had been going through a lot of transgressions, dealing with a lot of my parents, things that they're going through, I loved being at church because it was my home. It was where people accepted me. People thought I was cool, you know? Not that I worried about that. People thought I was cool at school, or like, you know, I was successful in having friends. I wasn't like a lonely person. But I think the music is what was really the most impactful thing, you know, in the beginning. And I think that the power of worship and music, I thought that was my connection to God. The emotion, I think that to me at the time was kind of the proof that God was real. You'd lead worship, and I mean, we had many worship sessions, you know, that would get very emotional. And so that to me was kind of that main connection that I had. A lot of the other things, a lot of the other aspects were good, but I don't think they really ingrained roots in me. Like, I don't think I would necessarily say I had true faith, or like the concept of Jesus. Or I always had questions about those sort of things, even from an early age. But I didn't really worry about it. I didn't need to have to worry about it because I knew God was real. You know, right around like 11th or 12th grade, you know, I think I was a student leader in 10th grade, went to DC. You know, I just started to kind of poke holes. And I was starting to kind of get more thoughtful and intellectual, didn't understand a lot of things of why I'm saying we at the time, like why we believe what we believe. The combination of socially conservative things and with kind of universal love, I was having a lot of trouble connecting those. Meeting a lot of people that broke that mold, you know, that I didn't know in church. And I think and then I'd see people that by the time you're in 12th grade, you know, I've known people for 5 or 6 years. Mom got divorced. I think it was just like, I just saw the holes in it, you know?
Yeah.
I think, again, now that I'm older now, I understand, looking back, like, it's very reactionary at that time. That's just where I was.
Yeah,
you know?
sure.
And I could understand. I think at times, I don't know if the word's difficult, but I think I was a difficult student for you because I'd push back a lot. what I would perceive as you as a minister, are trying to project your message, which I wholeheartedly think that you do in good faith,
Yeah, sure.
but it just wasn't good enough for me. And not that has anything to do with your intentions. I had questions.
When you say you're a difficult student, something just came to mind. I'm going to tell a quick story. You were performing in our youth center one night. I wasn't there. I wish I was, because this was an epic story.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
The underwear story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're just doing a song, and right in the middle, there's hundreds of students there.
Yeah.
It's on a Friday night.
Yeah.
You're up there waxing eloquently on your 6-string, probably singing, and you had the band with you, your band that you'd formed. You had multiple bands back then, and it was a sax, or what was the instrument?
Clarinet.
The clarinet soloist came
Kyle.
out from the back,
And my buddy Kyle.
in his whitey tighties,
Yeah.
performed the clarinet solo, and then walked off.
Yeah.
So when you say you're a difficult student, I mean, we had some challenges. That was
Yeah, and I
fun to deal with. That was hilarious.
even mean it that way.
No, I know. That's just what came to mind. I know.
No, that's good. I think that was just me not understanding that there's like kind of a line. Because like we would do skits and stuff, and it was okay to be funny at church. But we was cool. I never had a problem though. I feel like I owned it and apologized, and it was fine. I think what I mean is I remember one time specifically, I always felt very open talking to you, and like you showed me your Walkman. You're like, most people put the headphones on, press play, and it works, and they are satisfied with that. And you're like, you are a person who needs to know exactly how it works. And
wow, that was deep. I didn't remember saying that. That's good.
Nice work.
Should be writing that down.
Yeah.
That analogy worked perfectly.
That's a good one, dude.
What's a Walkman? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
A cassette player.
So I remember
do
that,
remember that.
and I always thought about that. I was like, okay, well, I'm just a person that needs to know how it works, and it was never like a decision, like, oh, like it's I'm done with this. I think it was just kind of like, I don't belong here anymore, because I felt like I was kind of doing damage. Not kind of, feel like I was doing damage to your ministry, and that's cool because I loved you. And I still do, and I love what you guys do and what you did for me and for a lot of people. It just wasn't appropriate for me to be there anymore. I didn't want to live out this thing in front of everybody.
Yeah. And that was about your senior year or so. I'm trying to think back.
By the time I was kind of all out, I think I was all out senior year.
Yeah. And then so post high school.
Yeah.
We've stayed in touch over the years, and you went out west for a while, and communication got scarce for a little bit, but I know we've always had a very good open dialogue between the two of us. And talk us through just where you were then in those years.
So I mean, I just went and did my thing. I think a lot of the things with the name change, and which is my grandma's name, so I took her last name. I think what it was just, I hated where I was coming from. I felt like it was such a horrible representation of who I was, and I just felt like misunderstood. Now I look back, I realize I didn't need to do that. But, anger at my dad for being what I perceived at the time, I think he would admit it too, that just a really selfish person. And I think the damage that inflicted and all of the collateral damage that happened with that. I wanted to just stand on my own.
Yeah.
And I think it was the right thing to do, because I got to go to San Francisco and kind of just start my life over. And not that I didn't shun anything that was before. And that's the thing. It's like not about forgetting about everything that happened, because now when I look back, I still carry a lot of the things that we were talking about with me those times. I didn't realize it at the time, but this source of moral goodness that I learned through church, I think that I had a lot of impact on a lot of people. I think that God is proud of, and I think that you'd be proud of if you were to know of the details. But yeah, worked in fashion for about 7 or 8 years, some wholesale, mostly high-end retail, men's clothing. I worked at Hugo Boss, John Barbados. Continued to kind of dig deeper into what I've kind of come to term like secular religion. It's kind of like holding the truths that you hold as a Christian, but like in a secular manner, just being like firm on what's the truth, being so sure of those things. I mean, I met a lot of people that bucked a lot of the things that I was taught. Had a lot of gay friends, and I started to kind of see the world a lot differently. It really bothered me that I had met so many great friends and people, and that it was something that was wrong, viewed as wrong, and I think that that affected me, and I would say it's still something that I would say is maybe my number one complaint. But yeah, I would say then I kind of, as I was wrapping up my time in San Francisco, I got out of retail, stopped working in fashion because I was just tired of it being about money, and you have clients and they're less than friends but more than acquaintances, and you're maintaining relationships for the sake of maintaining business, which I kind of didn't have the maturity at the time to realize it's like that's kind of how the world works. We all have those relationships.
Sure.
And then switched over, started bartending a lot, got really into food and beverage, but still always working in service, always serving people. I really enjoyed doing that. I feel like I'm good at it, Then moved to Chicago, got married, near the end to my longtime girlfriend. Continued to get kind of closer and closer back to my roots. Moved back to Grand Rapids a year ago, and I would still say, but really have started to think about life and God a lot differently recently. I would say in the last year I've kind of turned some corners on how I feel about those sort of things. But I think my journey was more of just like being okay with who I am and being like, well, you're different, like, why am I different in these ways? And how can I be more normal? And now I realize that's just like not possible. Like, no, you are just like different. You don't make sense to people. Your story is unique and kind of patched together, but I think that it's helped me now that I've kind of embraced it. It's just like, it's like freeing. And I feel like now I feel blessed to have made it through all those things. I've like learned so much about myself and how to interact with other people.
Let's talk for a minute, because there's a lot of people in this audience that are youth pastors, volunteer youth workers, some parents, but particularly like to the people working with students right now. I think in all my years of working with students, I've seen, and I always tell this to a few, but it's true, dude. You're always one of my favorites.
Thanks. Thank you. Oh, we're a great friendship,
We do, and
I'm sure it was
even though
weird.
you're difficult in your whitey tidies. But like
it's funny though,
But I look at that and I wonder. I know how I feel sometimes when I hear directly or indirectly from a former student that's graduated that they've kind of walked away from Christianity. Mm-hmm. It's a mixed bag of feelings.
Sure.
And so speak to the youth workers listening to this and talk about what would you say to them about how they should respond when they hear that about their students.
This might sound counterintuitive, but it's not all about God. It's not all about just like developing faith in young people. Sometimes for me, it was I needed someone to talk to. I needed someone to hang out with. I needed someone to like think, think I was cool. Not for my ego, but like I needed a friend, and like we would tell jokes and play music together. And like those are all things that have a lot of value, and I wouldn't get just because I see you and I being friends for the rest of my life. I could change my faith or whatever. I could go in a totally different direction. Not that I plan on doing that, but like it's not all about that faith, It is for you, and that's great, and it is for me. But I think that youth pastors or teachers take solace in the fact that even when I was in San Francisco, I wasn't promiscuous. I experimented with drugs and alcohol, but I wasn't a drug addict, and I didn't fall into those traps. I'm happily married, a good dad, accountable. I think that those are values that I wouldn't have if it wasn't for you and Mark. Kyle and I talk about it all the time, and I think that we have so much in common. So don't beat yourself up, because I've gained so much. I wouldn't be the person that I would be without that kind of influence in my life, and I think that your inspiration for being that influence in my life comes from your faith in God. And I would say that, when you're a pastor, I talk about this with Kyle a lot because we were in the same house, so it's like, why did he go this way? Why did I go this way?
And Kyle, by the way, you mentioned Kyle, he's your brother, step brother, who works here at Never the Same.
Yeah. Kyle Wood. Yeah. I would just say faith comes a lot easier for some people than it does for others.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're out there and there's so much more than just, is this person living a Christian life? Because I feel like I do live a Christian lifestyle, even though, I'm really pretty conservative person. Like, I don't drink a lot, cutting back on marijuana use. I think, for the most part, like, you could come to my house and be like, there was not much difference between my house and your house.
Yeah.
I go home every night and, I got things I got to do, and I'm accountable to my wife and my son and my job, and I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for that. I'd be more out there. I'd be more like eclectic. I'd be more like my dad. I'd be just doing what I want to do, not understanding the value in having family,
Yeah.
So that's what that'd be my message. It's like it wasn't wasted. The time wasn't wasted because we're still friends. And you have a lot to gain from talking to people who have contrarian thoughts and feelings about your work, can help you challenge you to become better about your messaging, what kind of people you want to reach.
Yeah.
Going back to your high school years, and
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned that you started to poke holes into the faith and kind of questioning and everything like that. And yet you were really close with Jeff and had a tight relationship, a friendship. Did you feel like you could still ask the hard questions and still be who you could be, or you felt like you couldn't because it would distort that relationship?
I felt like I did, and I was. I felt like it was never about Jeff. And I felt like every time I saw Jeff and it was cool. I think he kind of understood. Poking holes is just like semantics. I think it would just say like, like the Bible says to like love us all, or like that all humans are created in God's image. Something that I actually do believe. But then like why are people gay? And then it becomes like a choice of, okay, well, you're born that way, or this. Questions bring up other questions.
I guess what I'm asking is like
ahead.
having those questions, like why did you have to leave because of those questions instead of like feeling like you could still ask those questions amongst the community that is found in a youth group?
I don't think I was satisfied with the answers, and I might still not be. And I think that's where we just are going to disagree. And at that time, I just didn't want to go anymore. I was just like, okay, I'm not like on to living some hedon lifestyle. I was like, this is not fulfilling me the way that I used to, or whatever. And I don't think it has anything with a relationship. And maybe Jeff at the time wasn't equipped to answer the questions either, or didn't maybe know what I was getting at because I didn't know how to articulate what I was really questioning. And then you're just like, you're still so young. Like you don't understand responsibility. I just was not going to take the usual thing, the usual explanation. And I just didn't feel like going anymore. I was like, I'm trying to work on something else. It just wasn't intellectually stimulating. But I still think we maintain a friendship.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, it was never like, I'm out of here. It was just kind of like, I think I'm moving in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I asked that question just as like is the place that we are providing for students welcoming for somebody like you, Corey, that is having those questions and those doubts and start to go, what you are saying and how it just doesn't compute with me and my intellectual ability. And so you just walk away versus going, is this a place where I can have that discussion? And, for our audience of youth leaders, and we have those students that come into the doors and start to question things of the faith. And are we able to give answers that will allow them to wrestle with it and have a safe place to discuss it, not go,
And if we're open to say, hey, this is the kind of environment where you can be skeptical, contrarian, ask the questions.
Yeah.
I've gone back in my memory and tried to think, wow, what kind of environment did we create there with our ministry? And I think as people are listening to this, I would encourage them, be intentional about verbally when you're together in your group publicly saying, hey, we want this to be a place where you can bring your doubts and questions, because I've always really admired and respected students that were skeptical and doubtful, because it just created great dialogue, and it showed that they were thinking. They weren't just swallowing, the food that we were feeding them without asking, hey, what's in here? I always like
Yeah,
that.
I would say something that would have satisfied me at that time, and even now, something that I embraced, especially like as I was kind of coming to my own at those end years in high school, I would say is that like I'm really uncomfortable with people being too sure about anything. Not that I'm like some sort of humanist or like science needs to explain everything, but more, no human has been to heaven or seen it. There's the faith in it, and there's an acknowledgement that I could be wrong. We all could be wrong. That would have probably made me feel like, okay, which means I could be wrong too, and I think that that's an important thing. I mean, that's what's really turned me off actually, about like secular religion, or atheist religion, is that it's like whether you're a Christian or you're Muslim or you're an atheist, it's like this overconfidence that you can just like 100% say this is the way that it is, and I know, when I know that there's no way that you could actually say you could know. Now you have a hunch and you have great faith, and I respect that. But I think that that's like needs to be more of the answer. And sometimes there's a tendency with religion, and I'm including atheism as well, because like especially when I was out in San Francisco, like I branded that as just people like, there's no God, I'm just like, well, you don't know either. You don't know, just like the person that says that they do know. And I think if you're having struggles, like an intellectual struggle with a student, as a pastor, to be like, the truth is that I have a deep faith that this is the truth, and that never is going to shake, but there is no way that I can prove to you that this is what's wrong. There's only faith. And I'm not sure how that flies. I don't know if that's like, don't do that rule, like in pastor boot camp, they're like, don't even open that can of worms,
I can't tell you what we talk about in pastor boot camp.
I
That's a
wouldn't.
secret.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
So Corey,
does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
It does.
Totally.
Because it means I can trust you. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I can trust you with the infinite questions of the universe, which is like those are the things that I was thinking about.
Yeah.
It's like this just kind of seems like just a little too black and white.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, Corey, you were on that. We've been talking about this a little bit here and there in these episodes. You were on the front edge, I think, generationally, of a generation that grew up in the information age.
Yeah.
With access to so much opinion and what people believe and what's out there. And let me ask you this to kind of wrap up. You've alluded a few times. Where are you at now?
I'll be candid. I had called Kyle Wood up about 2 months ago, and I had gone into the church, St. Alphonsus, which was like just right by my house, just because I felt like I should go there because I was just so unhappy, and also I was feeling something tugging at me because I had kind of had this paralysis by analysis kind of thing that was happening to me, where I kept on kind of coming to these conclusions in my mind about God, or kind of what is morality? What is the source of morality? What is the source of what is good? What is it inside of me that makes me want to do good or be good? And, I feel like I do have come to the conclusion that God is real. I do believe that there is God, and that God did create us in his image. And I think that that is really, really important for humanity to understand.
How many years ago did you graduate high school?
2004. So
14 years.
14 years.
So, listening to this, for some people working with students, they may be thinking, oh man, the student graduated a couple years ago and they seem so far from God in their perspective. And it's the older you get, you realize, boy, the long play on something
yeah.
is really where it's at, and just knowing that there's movement, there's traction, there's always hope. And Corey, it's really, yeah, you're a beautiful person. I'm just so glad you're able to share your story, and thank you for being vulnerable with us.
Oh yeah,
Appreciate it.
sure.
Appreciate it.
This is fun. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'll close on that. Like I would just say, dude, like 14 to 18, dude, you don't know anything. There's still so many things that you're gonna learn and mess up on, and it can kind of bounce you in either direction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, play the long game.
Well, I feel kind of somber after thinking about these two guys, our conversation, and knowing where they are. And I always feel hopeful, like things are happening and progressing in their lives. But these two guys, for us, represent, maybe for you listening, people in your lives that that you're reaching out to, and you're wondering and attempting and going, what can I do to really speak truth and to continue to be a steady, faithful influence of Christ's love in their life?
I know when Aiman said, "I don't blame you, Jayson," and to hear that, it's like that's somewhat comforting, but at the same time, he also said, "I didn't feel prepared to face the opposition, to face what he was facing," and so then I place that responsibility on me to say, "I did not give you enough resources. I did not give you enough things to walk away from high school and enter the world with the confidence to be able to live out your faith and defend your faith, even against Christians who may have alternate beliefs." And so, yes, he doesn't blame me, but I still feel that weight.
I go back to the conversation we had a couple episodes ago in talking about 9 seismic movements in youth ministry in the last 9 years. And one of those is thinking is taking over. And what we talked about, and I would encourage you, if you haven't heard that, go back, and it's in our list of 9 things. But one of the things is how students, their thought process has changed. And intellectualism and more of a cerebral approach, I think, is more important than it has been in the past with students and our approach to them about faith and Christianity, because they do connect. I mean, faith and belief, those aren't separate things. And my encouragement to you as you're listening to this is think about what you can do to prepare and to think. And I'm thinking about a great resource that you could have. And I downloaded, I think it's amazing. If you go on the App Store, it's Cold Case Christianity. That's a great app. It's got a lot of resources. And we're interviewing the author of that app and all the material in it on this podcast. So check that out.
Yeah, J. Warner Wallace is one of those guys that you highly respect because of the length of and depth of research and investigation that he has gone into with the Christian faith. And so, yeah, that comes to mind when you start to think, man, someone like Aiman or Corey, who could have their hands on a book like this and read it and go, okay, it's leading me towards believing, versus not having anything and then just giving up on faith altogether.
What I loved about the app is that he's got podcast episodes in there, so you or your students could listen. It's got YouTube links in there as well, so they could watch, or you could watch. It's got all, so there's a book, there's listening, there's visual, there's lots of different resources. Highly encourage you, as a takeaway from this episode, to think about a resource like that called Cold Case Christianity.
The Thought Factory podcast is brought to you by Never the Same, whose vision is to see new generations transformed in Christ to further the kingdom of God. Learn more at neverthesame.org.
Welcome to the bonus segment. As always, we want to thank you for joining us after the episode is done. This is all the content that we are discussing is around Claim Your Campus 2020, an event that we are doing in the year 2020 on the weekend of July 4th. You may have heard about it, you may not. If you have not, check us out at claimyourcampus2020.com and see more about what you can do to be involved. One of the ways that you can be involved is becoming an adult advocate. What that entails is basically claiming a school in your community that you care about and really becoming an advocate for the students that go to that school, to then allowing that to be an avenue for those students to attend our event in 2020. So that is one way that you can be involved for Claim Your Campus 2020.
So you're going to be kind of like an Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes, a guide.
Yes, a guy, or a Yoda.
Yep, you explain how important it is, but you can't actually fight the fight for them.
That's right. So you could be like that. And so we're looking for lots and lots of adult advocates. And all these updates, we're giving just bits and pieces. We're talking with artists that will be there that are signing on, and there's some exciting conversations we're having. We can't announce anything right now, but you've already heard, if you've listened to these, you've already heard For Yourselves for King and Country talking about being there, and some others. Pretty cool. But Jayson, there's something that every adult advocate gets when they officially become an adult advocate.
When you become an official advocate, you will receive a toolbox, an advocate toolbox from us. We will mail this toolbox to you. It weighs about 40 pounds, and you will be able to put all sorts of tools inside of it. Am I correct?
Maybe like
drawers that don't open unless the top opens, and it saves your shins from being banged because of the rubber feet and edges.
No, I don't. What do shins have anything to do with the toolbox? I'm not following you there.
Have you never hit your shin on a toolbox?
I have not. Really?
Maybe you put your toolbox on a shelf.
Wait a minute. You've seriously hit your shins with a toolbox lid?
Well, not with the lid, but when the toolbox is on the ground and you walk and you don't realize it's on the ground and it's so heavy with all the tools, and then you hit your shin on that box.
But it's on the ground.
It's on the ground.
How do you hit your shin if it's on the ground?
Well, the box is not flat. Like the box it has size to it, so it's about how high?
Really tall toolbox, man.
How tall is your shin?
It
starts after the ankle.
Yeah. Well,
and that your ankle's what? Maybe 3-4 inches off the ground.
I've never ever hit my shin.
I have
toolbox
seen
lid,
toolboxes taller than 3 or 4 inches.
Really?
Yes.
Well, yeah, of course.
And so,
of course,
because your shin is the next part of your leg, and toolboxes probably don't go much more than 16 inches.
So you're saying the lid is sticking up and you hit your shin on the lid.
I'm just hitting my shin on toolboxes in general, like whether the lid is open or closed.
So that's happening a lot for you?
Look over there. You see in our studio there's a toolbox?
Yeah.
Sometimes your shin can hit that.
Yeah, that's a new one for me.
It doesn't move.
It's probably going to happen to me now in the next week. I'm going to go, Jayson,
I'm going to put these toolboxes that are heavy in front of your office door.
Okay.
So speaking of toolboxes, the advocate receives one, and apparently they don't receive an actual toolbox with tools. But
apparently, we're doing that for their safety because we don't want them to hurt their shins.
No shin injuries involved with our toolbox.
Okay, good.
But what you do receive will be a shirt. You will receive training booklets. You will receive stickers. You will receive ETCs.
ETCs, what's that?
Extra stuff to take care of.
As in like, etc.
That too.
Shirts, training booklets, stickers, etc. I know the training booklet's really cool. The training booklet helps you as an advocate really be a guide for students at that school, and primarily like teaching you how to pray for that school strategically. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool what's happening as adults are already signing on to become advocates. So if you want to get that toolbox, if you want to get a sweet Claim Your Campus 2020 shirt, which I happen to be wearing as I record this, then become an advocate. Where do they need to go?
Do you want me to describe your shirt or tell them where to go to get that shirt?
You can describe the shirt. We're going a little long in the bonus segment. Why not? Go ahead.
It's got it's a charcoal heather look for the shirt. I'm sure it's soft.
It is
to the
soft.
touch.
It is.
Not like velvet soft, but it's softer. It's comfortable to wear. It has Claim Your Campus 2020 in block letters. It's a combination of white and our branded yellow on it as well. And so it's not flashy. It's not something that's going to be like, oh man, I have to have that, until you actually see it.
That's right. It's a good shirt. So you get one of those.
And you can find those shirts
at
claimyourcampus2020.com.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.